Alright, so today I'm going to be reviewing The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. It is the first book in the Mistborn trilogy, and kind of the way this review is going to be segmented is the first portion is going to be spoiler free, so if you haven't read the book, that's okay. And then the second portion is going to be spoiler filled, so if you haven't read the book, don't watch that part. So just to jump right into the spoiler free section. So one of the things I wasn't crazy about with this book for is, I would say, for about the first 1/6 of the book, I thought the dialogue was a little cringy. It just wasn't really flowing together for me. And then for the rest of the book, I thought it was pretty good. And I don't know if that was just me not being used to Brandon Sanderson's writing style. And so maybe once I got more used to it, it just flowed better for me. But definitely for the when I very first started reading the book, I was like, "Ooh, I don't some of the lines that the characters were saying, I just wasn't really enjoying." But then once I got deeper in, I really felt it started to pick up, and some of the jokes landed and things like that. So I do think that maybe it was just me getting used to it. Overall, I definitely would say that I did enjoy the dialogue for this book. It was just the first portion that I wasn't a huge fan of. And then kind of to get into something that I did like about this book, the characters were phenomenal. You will fall in love with these characters. They have very rich pasts. One of the things that Brandon Sanderson I feel like does really well in this book is having characters believably deal with trauma. There are some characters in this book that went through a lot of trauma in their past, and I feel like it is dealt with in a very realistic way and also an interesting way to read. Um, so yeah, even some of the secondary characters, I feel like they are incredibly fleshed out in terms of being a secondary character. And I just think that that is one of the highlights of this book is the characters. There is very strong characters. You will find yourself just being so engaged because you really care about what happens to these characters, which I really enjoyed. Another positive that I would have to give for this book is the world building, just kind of the setting that it takes place. I find it a very interesting premise. So, kind of for just like a brief description of the world. So, the whole concept is that this book is if, say, the bad guy had won in like previous things. So the bad guy won, the dark ruler or whatever won, and now this is the world that he has created. That's kind of where we're starting off with this book, and I really enjoyed that. I thought it made for a very interesting setting. I thought that kind of like the class system that Brandon Sanderson develops in this book is very, I mean, it's horrible. It's a horrible class system, but it's very intriguing. It's very interesting to read about. And so I felt like the world building was top notch. So another pro that I'd have to give this book is that the pacing I really enjoyed. There was never really like a lull in it for me. There was never a part where I was like, it was really kind of dragging on. I do felt it moved at a very comfortable pace all the way through. And then about for the last, I would say 1/4 of the book, the last fourth of the book, it really hit a stride and it was like impossible to put down. It got really, really good for like the last fourth. The whole book was good, but the last fourth was just phenomenal. So overall, in terms of kind of the spoiler-free section, I do think that this book is a great kind of starting place if you maybe want to start reading fantasy and you don't want to start with like some long epic fantasy like a Wheel of Time or a Game of Thrones or something like that. If you don't want to read some like huge thing with like hundreds of characters, I think that this is a great starting place. I think that Brandon Sanderson is a very, very talented writer, and I think that he does a tremendous job of kind of crafting this world that's really interesting to read about with some really dynamic characters. So overall, I do think that if you're looking for a good starting point to get into kind of modern fantasy, I do think that this is an excellent book for that, and I really suggest picking it up. All right, and so now to enter the spoiler-filled section. So if you have not read the book, don't watch anymore because I'm going to completely spoil the ending. I will talk about everything that happens. So don't watch anymore if you haven't read the book. So for me, what I would have to say is the highlight of this book was the death of Kelsier. And like it was really sad, don't get me wrong, but like that when that happened and like what followed that, that is what took this book from like a it was a solid book to like I love this book. I'm going to recommend this to like everybody because it just hit such an emotional part for me. It was just because you really grow attached to these characters while you're reading it. You really fall in love with Kelsier, and you really love what he's doing for Vin, and you love the fact that, it's kind of like there's this, father-daughter kind of relationship, a mentor relationship going on, and just when he dies, it's just so saddening, just because you love him, you love Kelsier. Like, Kelsier was my favorite character, and they killed him, which was great though. I think that is a really emotional thing, and I'm glad that they put that in there. So for me, that was the highlight of the book, was the death of Kelsier, and then everything that followed after that I thought was phenomenally done. I feel like they just really put the book in like hyperdrive. I was not expecting the Lord Ruler to get beaten in this book. Like, I thought there was no way that would happen, and they did it. They did it in a very like reasonable way. I felt it was very well done. Um, Vin's line at the end in like the very last sentence of the book, I thought that was so cool. Like, Vin is awesome. Um, I do think like the fact that like Marsh was still alive, like I don't necessarily know if I thought that was like really made sense, but I enjoyed it because I was like, yes, go, yeah. I was glad that someone was there to stop to help Vin, but if I really think about it, kind of doesn't make sense that he was still alive. Like, they just kind of threw that in there, but I enjoyed it at the time just because I was happy that someone was there to help. And so then the whole part about the Lord Ruler's like logbook being like what we're reading at the beginning of every chapter, I thought that was really cool. I kind of saw it coming, just because like where he was like talking about like the terrorist people, I was like, oh, maybe that's the Lord Ruler, because the Lord Ruler doesn't like terrorist people. But like, I definitely didn't see it coming that he was actually not, the Lord Ruler was not the person who was writing the logbook. It was the Rashek. So I thought that was like really interesting. And then one of the other things I loved about this book was the strong secondary characters. I thought that Breeze was really cool. I thought that Ham, I think that there's a turn coming for Ham, just because everything, or maybe not, now that the Lord Ruler's dead, but just because everything that Ham brought up, he was asking a lot of questions, and they kind of played it off like, oh, he's just like a questioning kind of guy. But all of the questions that he asked were like very pro the Lord Ruler. Like, it could just be he's interested in like the philosophy of what they're doing and everything, but it definitely, there were times where I was just like, I think that they might be setting up a turn for Ham. We'll see. And so I really thought that was well done. And then one of my favorite characters was Ellen, not because I liked him, but because I thought he was really, really funny. Just because he really kind of struck me as like this, like, there are these people. It's a real life person where there's just kind of like wealthy. This person who was born into like a wealthy family, and he starts like learning maybe like some risque books, and then he starts, talking philosophy, and he thinks that somehow that's like making a difference for like people at the bottom, people starving in the world. Like, it's there. I feel like there are real people like that, and so I felt like that was a very well done character in that regard. So I found him kind of funny. I found him a little silly, hard to take serious at times, but I did enjoy him. I don't know if I like that he became king. I thought that was kind of cool. I guess I don't know if I buy that. Maybe he's not king at the end. I would. There's two more books. If he's not king at the end, I'm not gonna be mad. And yeah, when it comes to cons, one of like the only things I like had a problem with in this book was like the dialogue during the action sequences. Like, so unnecessary. Like, they do not, like, when Kelsier is fighting the Inquisitor, like right before he dies, he doesn't need to be like saying little lines like in between punches and stuff. Like, the Inquisitor's like, "Oh, I thought we got a fair fight," and Kelsier's like, "Who said I was done?" Like, that was just so. It wasn't necessary. You don't need lines like that. But so I thought the dialogue throughout the whole book was pretty good, but like the dialogue and the action sequences, I found like super cringy and not not good. Those were not good lines, just at all. And then the part where Ellen's dad left, like, that part felt super weird to me. Like, they left on really weird terms. And I have a feeling that he's going to pop up later in the book, or maybe not. Maybe he's just going to go into hiding and never come up again, because, like, I don't think the Ska are going to take very kindly to him. But overall, I did really enjoy this book, and it is 100% something I'm going to be recommending to people, because I do think that it is a really good kind of jumping off point if you're looking to get into the fantasy genre. And so yeah, I definitely plan on this being my go-to recommendation for people who kind of want to learn more about the genre. But yeah, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any kind of comments or critiques of anything I said, please leave a comment below. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed.